Pagastvam Sarvadharma Sarupaka Acharyana Mahacharyo Ramakrishna Te Namah. Om Bhadram No Apivataya Manaha. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sisters and brothers, loving Om Namo Narayana to each one of you. Sri Ramakrishna tells a story of a hookah smoker. Now, this man was addicted to smoking his hookah. So one night he got up and he felt for a smoke. But when he went to his fire, because he required red hot charcoal to be put into the bowl of the hookah, and on that you put the tobacco and then you smoke through this water chamber. When he went to his fireplace, he found that all the coals were dead. So, lantern in hand, he went to his friend's house, which is next door. Tapped on the door, there was no response. Rapped on the door, there was still no response. And then he banged on the door, and his friend came out, and he was quite astounded to see him there. Probably there was some problem that he had come there. So he asked him, "What are you doing here at this time of the night?" And he said to him, "Friend, you know how much I love to smoke the hookah. So I got up tonight, and I really felt like having a smoke, but my fires are out. So I've come to you to get some red hot coal." So his friend said to him, "But friend, how did you come here?" And he said, "I used this lantern and came along." So he said, "Yes, if you're using the lantern to come along, how is it that you were not able to light your charcoal on the flame of the lantern?" So many of us are like that hookah smoker. We have the lantern flaming, and yet we look elsewhere for red hot coals. Now, on the other hand, we have a person who came to Sri Ramakrishna, very well-known, famous person, who was none other than Mahendranath Gupta, the writer of Ramakrishna Kathamrita, or Sri Ramakrishna, or the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. On his first visit to Sri Ramakrishna, he realized that Sri Ramakrishna was the flame at which he was going to burn his coal, his spiritual coals, that is. So the very next time he came there, he put 4 quick-fire questions to Sri Ramakrishna, and they are as follows. How may we fix our minds on God? Secondly, how ought we, that is householders, to live in the world? Thirdly, is it possible to see God? And fourthly, under what conditions does one see God? Now, Sri Ramakrishna could easily have dismissed him, saying to him, "You go and read the Bhagavatam, or Chaitanya Charitamrita, or Narada Bhakti Sutras." But out of his compassion, Sri Ramakrishna gave a very compounded reply to M. And this is what he said, that God can be realized in this life. Right? And what is necessary is the repetition of God's name, and the singing of His glories, and the keeping of holy company. Let me go over that again. The repetition of His name, the singing of His glories, and the keeping of holy company. The Master went on to say that the mind refuses to dwell on God as long as there are worldly thoughts in the mind, and as well as worldly duties. So, what is necessary, the Master said, is occasional solitude, removing oneself from the daily chores and things of life, going into solitude and meditating. And Then he went on to say that while performing one's duty, one's worldly duty, one's mind should always be on God. And we know his famous example of the maidservant. While she's working in the house of the master, looking after his children, calling them her children and so forth, her mind is constantly on her home, her own child or children and so forth. So this is how one should conduct oneself. Then he says that one should discriminate that God is the only reality. One should discriminate the right from the wrong, the good from the bad, the true from the untrue, the real from the unreal. And above all, one should have sincere yearning. Now, very often, people say, I pray to God every day, but nothing is happening, and so forth and so on. That is because the yearning is not present. One has to have that yearning. One has to have that relationship with God. Every now and then just going there when you have a problem saying, God, solve my problem, it's not going to happen. So there must be this yearning for God. So let us go through these statements one by one. Firstly, the repetition of God's name. So one should be repeating God's name with every breath that one takes, as a matter of fact. Okay? And in a 24-hour cycle, a human being breathes 21,600 times. So in a half that period, 12 hours of day, he will be breathing 10,800 times. But the saints have been very compassionate and understanding, and they say that perhaps is not possible, so do it 108 times. And that as well we cannot do. So how poorly off must we be? So there has to be this constant remembrance of God, not only when you're in trouble, but always. Secondly, the keeping of holy company. Right? Satsang and sadhusang are very important. All religions have satsang. That is because it is so important. Otherwise, they wouldn't be having it. Okay, they do not call it satsang, but it is where there is this congregational worship or praising of God. So different religions have different days on which they have it, but it is had. So with us also there should be this constant satsang and sadhusang. And then one should visit holy people. We spend lots of time visiting people who make no difference to our spiritual lives. If we belong to this organization, better still, if we are devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, then we should be thinking and speaking of Sri Ramakrishna as often as possible. If you speak to members of other organizations, you see how often they will speak about the miracles that their guru has done, or their founder has done, or their avatar has done, etc., etc. But we don't do that. We are just members of the Ramakrishna Center. We are not devotees of Sri Ramakrishna, unfortunately. So on visiting holy people, what do? You listen carefully to what they are saying. Okay? In Sanskrit, in Vedanta, this is referred to as Shravana, listening. And in the absence of somebody who can speak to us, then we could read. Reading scripture is just as good as listening to somebody who is giving a talk. So that should be done. So there's no excuse as I have no time to go to the ashram, I have no transport to go to the ashram, or something of that sort. One can read. So that is Shravana. The next is ruminating on what has been said or what has been read. Thinking about it. How do I fit into this? How does this affect my life? Am I acting in accordance with what this is saying? That is called manana. thinking about. Then finally, there is the meditating on and the practicing of what has been heard and what has been thought about. And this is called nididhyasa. Now, in his famous song, Bhaja Govindam, one of the stanzas that Shankara gives is Satsangatve nisangatvam, nisangatve nashtamoham, nashtamohe nischalatatvam, nischalatatve jivan mukti. So, the basis is the satsang. By attending satsang and so forth, you have this discrimination that sets in. Even in the Ramayana, it is said, Vinu satsang vivekana hoy. It's the same thing. So satsang is a very important thing in one's life, and one should pay attention to that. So also one should spend time where God is being glorified. That is important. Once you are there, then it starts to set into the mind. It starts etching into the mind. And very soon those spiritual thoughts become part of one's life. So that is why it is important. Then this business of going into solitude. See, all of us are caught up in worldly thoughts and actions. Every day we are engaged in this, or we have this happening around us. So every now and then it is necessary to withdraw from this hubbub of life and go into solitude. And do what in solitude? Think about God is what one should be doing. And apart from that, the purpose of life. What is the purpose? What is the purpose of my life? Why am I here? Is it just to eat, drink, and make merry? Or is there something more to it than just that? That is what should be going on in our mind all the time, as a matter of fact. So, when one goes into solitude, one is with oneself, basically. Because this whole thing is just consciousness. And when you go into solitude, you are with yourself. That is important, to be with oneself. And all, one must defend oneself against any distractions that come. Sri Ramakrishna says that when a plant is young, you put a fence around it so that it is not destroyed by goats and so forth and so on. So also, when you get into a spiritual situation, then one should be very careful not to allow any foreign intervention, as it were. Now, by getting away doesn't necessarily mean renunciation, doesn't mean giving up your family and so forth. You get away for a short while, 3 days perhaps. At one time we used to have 3-day yoga retreats at the center. Unfortunately, they had to be cut down because of various reasons, but it is more a disadvantage than anything else that has happened. And it would be a good idea to revive that situation. Also, going to solitude means males coming and living in the ashram sometimes in your life. Provision has been made for you to come here. But in the 3 weeks that I've been here, I found people from outside our organization coming to stay here, but no one from within our organization. And that is not a very good reflection on ourselves. Then the fourth one is continuous discrimination. Continuous. Not only at times when you are in trouble, when you ask, where is God in all this, and so forth and so on. Continuous discrimination between what is real and what is unreal. Nitya Nitya Viveka, or Nitya Nitya Vichara. Whenever you come into constant contact with something, you ask, is this real? Everything that we come into contact with, as a matter of fact, is unreal. Everything in the world is unreal. Why? Because it goes through 6 stages. It comes into existence, it exists, it changes and grows, it decays, and then it dies or disintegrates. That is what we go through, all of us. Even pieces of metal go through that process. So nothing is real. Only God or consciousness or Brahman is real. So, no one of us knows when the call will come for us to leave this earth. There is a song in which it actually says that you therefore have to be ready, taking the name of the Lord all the time, because you don't know when the call will come. That being the case, then we have to make a habit of repeating God's name, so that even if by accident we are going to lose our lives, we will be doing it repeating God's name. Of course, as I said previously, there are those who believe that at the time of dying, they'll be able to remember God. But that's not possible. Sri Ramakrishna again tells a story of a man who is on his deathbed and all his relatives are around him. And while almost giving up his life, he says to them, "But why are all the lights on? You're only wasting oil, so cut down on the number of lights." So this is where his mind is, on saving money rather than saving his own life. So constant remembrance of God is what is necessary, and constant discrimination. Then there is this response to M's question, how ought we to live in the world? And Sri Ramakrishna says, God is accessible to all who make the effort. It's not only available to monks, God is even available to householders. But effort has to be made. Nothing comes by accident. So, what is the effort that one has to make? And that is detachment. Constantly perform your duty. You have to do your duty, but do it in a detached way, without expecting anything in return. Many of us have done things for our children and so forth. We know when we visit the old age homes how those children have reacted to those parents who have put so much of effort and sacrifice in bringing up those children. So even they will not be there at the time that you need them. So do your duty in a detached way. Then, again, to remind ourselves, we should be like the maidservant in the house of the master, constantly remembering her children at home that she has to go there and feed them and clothe them and bathe them or whatever has to be done. In that way, we have to constantly remember that we have to go back from where we came, and therefore effort has to be made. All other things that we come across, I'm going over this again, are untrue, unreal. That we have to constantly remember. It is no use piling up material gains, because at the time of going there's no trailer behind the hearse. So there is no need for all that. Just perform one's duty in a state of detachment. All right, so now let's quickly go over these 5 imperatives that Sri Ramakrishna has given us. Okay? Some people have called it the 5 commandments of Sri Ramakrishna. Others have called it the 5 precepts. And the first one is, keep chanting God's name and thinking of His glories. Keep chanting God's name and thinking of His glories. Second one is, do satsang and sadhusang. keep holy company, visit places where there are holy thoughts. That is important. Very often we go to places where no holy thoughts are. In the scriptures we find, for example, in the Satnarayan Bharat Katha, it is said that when you're having the Katha, you invite people with like minds. It doesn't say invite all and sundry, so that people don't come and disrupt the positive atmosphere of the place. So, keep holy company, visit places where there are holy thoughts. Thirdly, go into solitude every now and then and meditate. And, of course, you have to guard your spiritual feelings. Do not allow any trespassers into your field of spirituality. Fourth one, constantly discriminate and deliberate about right and wrong, true and false, real and unreal. Constantly. Not now and then when you have spare time, but constantly. And finally, discharge your duties as a householder with full responsibility, but being aware that nothing belongs to you. So, those are the 5 imperatives that Sri Ramakrishna has given us. And as householders, it is therefore imperative that we follow them. Then only can we claim that we are devotees of Sri Ramakrishna. Otherwise, we are just part-timers. May the blessings of the Holy Trinity be upon us all, so that we begin to progress spiritually. Oh.